Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and today I'm going to be reviewing Treasures of Nakbe from designer Reiner Knizia and publisher Mandu Games. In Treasures of Nakbe, you are going to be trying to lead 3 out of a group of 7 adventurers through a temple and then a jungle, trying to get them to have the highest score on a combined kind of race between both of those boards. Let me head you over to the table, I'll show you how it plays, then we'll come back here and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, here we see Temples of Nakbe, and one thing I want to point out before I get into this overview is that the rulebook suggests that for your first game, you only play through the one side of this double-sided board here. This is the temple, on the other side is the forest, and you would score just according to how they kind of exit on this side of the map. However, I think unless you're playing with pretty small children, the way to play this game is to play what they call the advanced game, where you play through both sides of the board consecutively and do scoring accordingly. That's the way that I'm going to actually show you the overview. I think that's really the way to play the game. So the only difference there is you flip this over, you place this over here. So this is the temple side of the board scoring, the jungle side of the board scoring. You're going to be putting some little scoring markers over here. All right, so what's going to happen is you've got here the guardian that's going to be kind of chasing these characters down, and these are the 7 characters that are going to be moving throughout this temple, and then on the other side the forest. Each player is going to be dealt secretly one of these team cards, and it's going to have 3 characters on them, and so each player would get one of these. They would look at them and they would keep it secret. However, because there are only 7 characters, inevitably you're going to have some repeats on these cards. So let's say this is player 1's card. They want these 3 characters to have the highest score to get out of the temple earliest, or get out of the 2 sides of the board earliest. And this is player 2's. So you can see in this case, player 1 and 2 both are kind of pulling for this character to score as high as possible. However, you're not going to necessarily know that because these are kept face down. You may be able to intuit what characters people are going for, and that's part of the fun of the game, but these will be kept face down. For the purposes of what we're doing, I'll just have them face up over here on the side of the board. Okay, on your turn, it's very simple. What you're going to do is you're going to roll this die, okay? This is a D6. However, it is a little bit out of the ordinary in that it has every value from 1 to 6 except for a 5, and it has the 2 represented twice on the die. It has that little arrow around there, and I'll show you why that is in a moment. So every number except for 5 on the 6-sided die, and 2 shows up twice. So let's say player 1 rolls the die, okay? They got a 6, wow. Well, they look at their card, and they've got an option here. They've got a choice. They can come right off the bat and move one of their 3 characters forward 6. That is potentially signaling to other players that they've got that character. But let's say they decide, yeah, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to move this character 6 spaces forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once their movement is ended, they're going to move on to the dark side of the space. If you look at the board, you can see that almost every one of these spaces has a dark side and a light side. Once you have finished your movement, you move into the dark space. There are some exceptions to that. There are some spaces like these that I'm pointing to here that only have dark, they don't have any light. So how are they going to move? Once a character moves into the dark space, the only way that they can move in this round is if a 2 is rolled, because the 2s, you can move any character, whether in the light or in the dark, forward those 2 spaces. All right, so player 2's turn, they would go ahead and roll. They get a 3. Maybe they're going to go ahead and move this character forward 3. 1, 2, 3. Move them into the dark side. When you are moving characters, you can never have characters share a space. So let's say that player A rolled a 4, and they wanted to move this character forward 4. They would go 1, 2, skip that, 3, 4, and put this here. Okay? You're going to continue to do this, moving characters, putting them into the dark side of the space once they have finished their movement. And then at that point, that's going to trigger the end of the round when every character is in a dark side of the space. That's going to be the Guardian's turn. The Guardian, on their first turn, moves from the center of the board into this kind of treasure chamber where everyone started. And then after that first round ends, the way movement for the Guardian is going to work is that they're going to move forward 5 spaces or until they reach a character. Some other things to note. you've got these treasure tokens that are randomly placed on the board, and they are from values 0 to 3, but they are very heavily weighted to 1. So there are a lot more 1 values than any other value on the tokens, okay? You're going to continue to roll the dice, moving characters, potentially collecting these tokens. Couple of things to note. You've got these traps, okay? These trap tokens, the way that these trap spaces, the way that those work is that if a character ends their movement on a trap space, they're going to go to the guardian space and then move forward 3. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, all right? That's how trap spaces work. The end of the round is going to be triggered when one of 3 different things could happen. Either one character leaves the board. In that case, that would trigger the end. You would place them on their spot. They would get the highest valued token, and then you'd go in reverse order from people who are closest to the exit to people who are furthest. Or if only one character is left in the temple, that would also trigger the end of the round. Or, and this is a very rare occasion, if there are no characters that are in a light space, that could also trigger the end of the round, or the end of this side of the board. Once one of those 3 things happens, you're going to flip the board over, and I'll kind of show you how that works. Okay, so let's say that this is the way that the score ended up on the end of the temple side of the board. You have the highest ranked token to the first one out, and then in descending order after that. What you're going to do in the kind of advanced game, which again I think is the way to play the game, is you're going to flip the board over to the jungle side of the board. And there are a couple of things to note here. Number 1 is that the rules are exactly the same. The Guardian's going to start up here. All of the characters are going to start in this first spot. The way the game plays is the same. On your turn, you roll a die, move the character forward a certain number of spaces according to what the die says, move them into the dark side of the space, if any. When they end there, you've got new treasure tokens that are placed out for this side of the board. But this board has a couple of variants, actually 3 of them. You could choose to play with some, none, or all of them. So let's talk about those 3 different things that change up the jungle side of the board. Number 1, you've got these 2 river spaces. These essentially work as having 2 dark sides of that space. And so if you end your turn in the river, when you would normally move to the light space, instead you're going to move to the dark space again. Okay, so it's basically slowing you down a bit by doing that. You also have the secret passage here. If you choose to play with the secret passage, if you end your turn in this space, when you move into the dark side, you would now jump all the way over here. But let's say, for example, someone had gotten there, moved over to that spot, and then someone else comes along and they end their spot there. Then what's going to happen? The old switcheroo. They're going to move like that. And then the last thing that you can add to this are the snakes. The way the snakes work is that if somebody ends their turn there, they're going to be removed from the board, and then the snake are going to travel upward to the exit and remove anybody that is in that column. Otherwise, it's going to work exactly the same way, rolling dice and trying to get your characters as high a position as possible until you have all of them triggering either one person leaving, one person left in the jungle, or no one in a light side of the space. Let's show you what it might look like. Okay, so let's just say for the purposes of this overview that this was how things ended up on the jungle side of the board. Then you would figure out the final score. And what you're going to do is you are going to look at your team card and you're going to find out what the score is for each of these characters. So for this character, you look here, they're going to get 12 points because they ended up in this position, the 6th position, point-wise, on both sides of the board. For this character, 10 points. For this character, it's going to be 7 points. You would add all of those up. You'd flip over your treasure tokens and add those. Player 2 would do the same thing. They would look at their card and evaluate what the final score is for each of their 3 characters, flip over their treasure tokens, and whoever has the most points is going to be the winner of Treasures of Nakbe. Let's head back over and I'll let you know what I think. All right, there you have Treasures of Nakbe. And as I mentioned in the overview, I really think that you want to be playing this on both sides of the board. They say for your first game to only play on the temple side and just score accordingly. And again, unless you've got small children, relatively small children, I don't think you need to do that. I don't think that you're saving very much in terms of complexity and time for the depth of the experience, okay? And one thing that I want to point out also is that this game is a re-implementation. Many times this designer, Reiner Knizia, he's put out a lot of games, and sometimes they are re-implementations of earlier games. And this is a re-implementation of a game called Dragonhort, if I'm pronouncing that correct, that I had not played before. But I did a little bit of research before I did this review to kind of see what some of the differences are. There are a couple. One is that in that game, they did not recommend to only play one side of the board. They said to go ahead and play both. So again, I don't really know why they made that change. Second is that instead of the treasure tiles in this version, they had gems in that game, which were each worth a point at the end. And so a little bit more luck in this one, being that you can have from 0 to 3. And then the other thing is that all of the variants on the jungle side of the board in this game, from the river spaces to the secret passage to the snakes, all of those are unique to this game. They didn't have any analogous things in Dragonhort that I could find anyway. All right, and so I'll talk about that when I get into the gameplay, but let's start off talking about the components. First of all, I think the components in this game are great. It's a relatively small box game, and they went with standees. In Dragonhort, they had plastic minis. I think the standees are great. Maybe it's a little bit harder to kind of tell who's who because you have to kind of turn them towards you potentially. I don't think that's a huge issue. The cardboard quality is good. The cards, there's not a whole lot of them, but the card quality is good. The tokens are good. I like the art a lot. I think the art in this game is terrific. The character design, I think, is vibrant, a little bit cartoony, but that fits the kind of the feel of the game, the weight of the game. I think it works out very well. So the look, I think, is very good. Maybe on the temple side of the board, it could be a little bit easier to differentiate which, light and dark, but it's really, those are quibbles. I think that aspect is very well done. No real complaints about the components. The wooden die is very nice. All of that is good. The rules I felt were good. On the production side of things, very well done. Gameplay-wise, so this is a roll and move game. And it's interesting in that roll and move as a mechanism, as a mechanic in modern board games is pretty often derided, and rightfully so. It can oftentimes feel like you're warped back in time 30 years to play games like Candyland. But this particular designer, Reiner Knizia, has shown that you can do roll and move and still add some interesting elements, and that is very much the case here. Don't let the roll and move fool you, so to speak. Because a couple of things kind of play with that. Number one, the way the die works, where you can move characters that are in the dark forward if you roll that too. The fact that you're skipping spaces means that sometimes you don't want to jump forward with one of your 3 characters, because as spaces in front of you get clogged up by characters, even rolling a 3 can move you forward a whole bunch of spaces because you're skipping all of the other characters in front of you. Also, this kind of the idea of shared incentives makes it very interesting in a roll and move game, because again, that it's very likely, even in just a 2-player game, that you're going to be sharing at least one of your characters with somebody else. And so being able to kind of suss out what characters do other players have, who do I want to try to get going into those traps to get them potentially caught by the Guardian. All of those nice little kind of, there's an element of bluffing to this game, and making people think that you've got a character that you really don't, so that they move them to the back and try to get them into traps and things along those lines. Those are nice little elements that really change up what is a simple roll and move game into something quite a bit more. One of the hallmarks of Reiner Knizia as a designer is taking a very simple rule set and making it more about the interactions of the players around the table than the actual mechanics of the game. And Treasures of Nakbe is a very, very good example of that. A very good example of very simple rule set, roll the die, pick a character that's not in the dark side of a space, and move them. That's basically it. But what that can lead to as far as getting into the heads of the players around the table, it's just lovely. And it's another example of how this designer can do something like that. Make it more about the people around the table than 15 pages of rules. All right? I like these 3 variants that are on the jungle side of the board. That to me makes this, again, I haven't played Drakenhort, but if I had a choice, I would be picking this one because I always choose to use all 3 variants on the jungle side of the board. The river spaces, the secret passage, and the snakes. They're all very simple little elements to add, but they add a lot of fun. And so you go through that temple side, everything is pretty much basic. You're just kind of seeing who do you think characters the other people have, and then using that information to use those 3 elements on the jungle side of the board. I think it just works very, very well. All of that being said, I think Treasures of Nakbe is a delightful, delightful game. One that scales well, plays well on different player counts. The rules are very, very simple to learn and teach. There's a fair amount of luck involved, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to be okay with that. But that also works well in what is essentially a family weight game. And so this is one that also I'd feel comfortable playing with children, with adults, with gamers, with non-gamers, and there's enough tactics in the game, strategy maybe, because you are, trying to do the, sometimes the long con, so to speak, making people think you've got a particular character when you don't, slow rolling sometimes, but it's mostly a tactical game with a fair amount of luck. That makes it something that you can have across a wide variety of players, and I think that works to its benefit. So all of that being said, I'm giving Treasures of Nakbe an 8 out of 10, an easy recommendation, a lovely little production, a game that, again, I had not played the original iteration of, but I'm happy to see this new version. I like the changes that were added to it based on what I can tell with my research on those jungle side of the board variants. And so there you have it, a very solid game, Treasures of Nakbe. That's going to do it for me. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from the Dice Tower Midwest Annex.